Hello, audience. Drew, unfortunately, got sucked into a portal to New Phyrexia, and I am alone today. But there's news to be given, and I've got to give it to you. There are 5 unbanned cards, and 12, I believe, cards that are coming onto the Game Changer list, and some accompanying articles with a good amount of thought and kind of direction that the game is heading. I'd like to talk about the unbanned cards as well as the game changers, give you kind of my 2 cents on them, and then let you know kind of what to expect in your Commander games, at least from my perspective, so hang on and buckle up. Off the unbanned list are 5 cards, starting with Gifts Ungiven. It is a blue card that basically allows you to find a few cards, some go to the graveyard, some go to your hand. At its worst case, it's an unfair infinite combo easy win game because there's usually no choice. At its best case, it's a fun card that can let you have a little politics, and overall, the way they described it is a good filter between telling kind of what bracket your deck is going to be in. If you're playing this fairly, it's a fun little politics tool. If it's unfair, then you're going to win right away. That'll kind of help decide where you should play. If you see this resolve, you either have no choice or it'll be a fun moment in Magic's history for you. So let's see where that goes, and keep your eye on this card. Sway of the Stars is a fantastic 10-mana sorcery that resets the game. Shuffle up all permanents, everything gets reset, and then your life becomes 7. This is a pretty wacky effect. It is frustrating to have games get reset, but in the case of this one, I can see a lot of long games going where everyone has blockers, no one has a way to win, that sometimes a reset is actually a faster. I wouldn't expect to see this one too much. It definitely is a pretty big, goofy spell. Braids Cabal Minion is unbanned. Braids basically requires a sacrifice to be paid every turn. The reason I think Braids was hit originally is because Braids can and does hit lands. So if you find yourself unfortunately behind, Braids will cost you a land. I think they cited here that removal has gotten a lot better. She just dies, and it is a little ironic to say it dies to removal, so why was it on the ban list in the first place? Yeah, a fair point, but this card is unbanned because of the speed and the efficacy of the removal that keeps getting printed. I think it's fair. Just watch out, don't let this sit around too long. Usually the player who's playing this has a way to deal with the sacrifice that makes it unfair for them. Coalition Victory, why I am even here today. This card is awesome. You have a 5-color commander and a few lands or whatever, you instantly win the game. They cited removal being better as why it's coming off the ban list. I think that's fine. Look, if you can play a 5-color commander and you can resolve a sorcery afterwards, maybe that's fast for some commander games, and especially in the goofy games, I get it. But it is pretty ridiculous that you can't play a 5-color win condition if you're playing, 5-color jank. So I'm glad to see it unbanned, and having lost to it personally at King's Cup, it's a very funny card, so I'm glad to see it there. Panoptic Mirror is probably the one that I'm kind of most thought-pressed on this one on the list. It is an artifact that allows you to imprint a spell, and then when it gets back to you during your upkeep, you get a copy of the spell. If you imprint any extra turns, you just have infinite extra turns. That is the reality of this card. At its worst case, though, you imprint a draw spell or a burn spell, removal spell. I think that's kind of a cool interaction. Every turn you get something for free, it gives you basically rebound infinitely. But here's the thing. You play it, it's an artifact, and if it doesn't get removed, hopefully that convinces your pod to play some more artifact removal. I think that's pretty great. And overall, I get why this card was on the list originally, but Magic has changed a lot since then, so happy to see it, especially in a world where Vandal Blast is in every precon. That's all for the bans. We're going to get into the Game Changers list, and we'll start from the top. The most obvious include for Game Changers, in my opinion, Teferi's Protection. It's an instant. It basically gets you up from the table. You can go have a snack. Everyone gets to play. Nothing happens to you. Extremely, extremely good example of what I think a Game Changer is. Now, this one feels a little different than other Game Changers because it's a one-time use that doesn't generate value and doesn't change your board position, but that is why it's here. It basically lets you make some pretty aggressive and crazy plays, keep up 3 mana, and as long as you're not interacted with, no one can crack you back. Pretty good definitional choice for the word Game Changer, so I'm actually happy to see it on this list. It is pretty wild to just be able to put this into, I don't know, like a 20 ways to win precon if you're doing a series about it, and have it just be an okay choice. So it makes sense. The next card, Humility, is an enchantment that turns all creatures into 1/1s and they lose all abilities. I played this card in a mean Super Friends deck that I made a long time ago. It is a horrible card for game speed. They go wide, it doesn't matter, they crack you for 1s, there's no pump effects other than counters. They go tall, they want to play a big boy with a great ETB, it doesn't matter, it shuts everything off. The decks that play this are typically playing to where they don't care about creatures, And the problem is they've still got to win, and you're still going to have blockers. They might be 1-1, but nothing gets trampled. It's pretty hard to beat through this. So all this really does is grind the game to a halt or kind of do some unfun things. I get why this is on a game changer. It does belong in a higher level of play than just playing like Unicorn's Tribal or something like that. Narset, Parter of Veils. Narset, there were two other, Notion Thief, and the third, which one was it? Orcish Bowmasters. These three cards were listed together as kind of like anti-wheel fun hate kind of. They are notorious like aggressive wheel targets. So what I mean is you put one of these down and then you force everyone to discard their hand and draw a new hand. And by doing that, you either steal all their cards, stop them from getting cards, or do 1 billion damage and get a huge army. This is a pretty lock-in aggressive, like choke out your opponent's resources as well as get advantage play that I understand why they would put this on the game changer list. It does change the way that the game is played. You are forcing people to ditch the cards they've been stockpiling over the game. You are forcing people into a situation where you're trying to build, but I think that belongs, somewhere 3 and up. That makes a lot of sense to me. They notably didn't talk about or touch cards, at least that I saw, that were like proactive wheel choices. So something like a Nekuzar that just does damage, or let me think, a Shielder to the Apocalypse. Cards that just do fair up damage that maybe are a little higher costed kind of dodge this, although I think they belong in the same arena. So keep an eye out for that. Although Narset Parter Veils has been just an issue since she was conceived. I mean, Windfall Narset was always bad. I understand where they're coming from this one. Intuition going on the game changer list makes sense. It's like a light version of Gifts Ungiven. Same thing here. Check for infinite combos. Lots of times if you structure your deck around it, they're going to have choices for you that there's nothing you can do. No matter what you put in the graveyard, you're going to lose. But at its best case, a really cool politics tool. I think that's neat, especially because Gifts Ungiven and Intuition both are in blue, which typically has a hard time tutoring for tutoring. They have a hard time tutoring, but tutoring for cards of their choice outside of instants and sorceries. Consecrated Sphinx is an interesting choice. This is a 6 mana 4/6 flyer, and on its own, the stats don't justify the position, but it basically functions as whenever you draw, I draw 2. So it's kind of like a reverse Uno rule in that way. I don't think that there's anything wrong with this. Their explanation kind of cited a use case that I think makes sense. It's when people start copying this, especially 2 different people, and I've been in some of these games where if 2 people have Consecrated Sphinx and anyone draws a card, the other Consecrated Sphinx gets to draw 2 cards. But because they do 2 cards, the other Consecrated Sphinx owner can draw 2 cards. And you can just draw your whole library that way. It's very silly, and it pretty much ends the game right there if you want it to. You can draw yourself all the way out or into your best cards. You don't have to. I get why. It seems like a lot of these game changers are getting added to the list because they add disproportionate playtime to turns, or kind of bring all the focus onto you, and it's something that they're trying to avoid and make a healthy timing. I don't think this is the strongest include, mostly because it does cost 6 mana, it hits the board, it does nothing right away, and it can be removed, which is the same argument they were given for unbanning stuff. So we'll see how it shakes out. It is a good card, don't get me wrong, and I've definitely played it in a lot of decks. Yes, Necropotence. 3 black mana, sit around forever. It's got some downsides, but really, it's pay 1 life, draw a card. And yeah, maybe it doesn't trigger draw triggers because it's not technically draw, but you end up paying 5, 10, 15 life, and yeah, you go down, but you see 15 new cards off the top of your deck, and you guys know, drawing cards is awesome. And especially in a game where you only have Singleton, where you're looking for the 1 card that matters. Yeah, you get it at the end of your turn, but still, I mean, this speaks for itself. The rate of paying 1 life for 1 card is crazy, so I understand why this is included, and I think this is a pretty good spot. Deflecting Swat. Deflecting Swat is a free redirect, and I think that as a whole, free spells probably deserve a category or a consideration. And in this case, I super understand why this is a game changer. You're playing against a tapped out red aggro player, or even the Temur tapped out player. You go after their most important creature, and it's all of a sudden a no-use situation. It is a cool concept for a card, but simply having your commander out and making a spell free is why Fierce Guardianship got added to the game changers list. Makes sense. Do Deadly Rollick and other free spells if you Flawless Maneuver belong here? Maybe, but I think those are on the lesser end compared to redirecting and countering spells. So something to hold on to for the future, but it makes sense. there were a collection of cards like Gamble, Worldly Tutor, and Crop Rotation. These are some interesting cards to put on the Game Changer list. Gamble, go find a card, put it in your hand, discard one at random. Worldly Tutor, go find a creature, I believe, put it on the top of your deck. Okay. And then Crop Rotation, sack a land, go find any land, put it on the battlefield. In my opinion, Crop Rotation is the best one of those because it goes straight to the battlefield. Very cool. But the reason they cited these as adds to the Game Changer list is because they're tutors that cost 1 mana. And that I understand. You get a bad opening hand, you see what everyone's playing, they play their first turn, you watch your 3 friends play Soul Ring Signet go. You go find your best answer in your deck. I get it. I think I understand what they're saying. They're talking about having a larger conversation about tutors, and I think it makes sense to do that. But at the most important core, these tutors are not game-breaking so much as they are just good, consistent early options. So I think I understand why they are putting them on Game Changer list, maybe to evaluate the tutor system as a whole, but they don't feel like the strongest adds to the list. Let's see. Seedborn Muse. Let's talk about Seedborn Muse. 5 mana, untap your, I think it's all permanents on each other player's turn. There was a notorious card a long time ago called Prophet of Krufix, which was out when I first started playing and maybe a little after. And I played a lot of games against this card. They're both 5 mana. I'll compare them. And Prophet of Krufix says untap your creatures and your lands as opposed to permanents. So Seedborn has the advantage there. Seedborn's also in 1 color. It's green, not 2 like Prophet of Krufix. But Prophet of Krufix also says creatures have flash. So I understand so much why that card was banned, because you would basically get 4 turns if you were playing Simic creatures. You play all your guys, on the next turn they'd untap, you play all your guys, on the next turn they'd untap, play all your guys. And it was a ticking time bomb, because every turn that went by, you would just see their whole board multiply. If you didn't have removal, they would get crazy value, pair it with a Guardian project, next thing you know, they're drawing their whole library, it's crazy. Seedborn Muse, on the other hand, is in several precons, especially some of the newer ones. It also doesn't give you the flash component as well, but it does give you the untap. They cited turn length as a primary reason why they kind of didn't like a disproportionate amount of turn time going to the player with Seedborn Muse, because you play on other people's turns. I don't love that as an explanation for why it goes on the Game Changer list, although I get it, especially if these lists, ban lists, Game Changer lists, are aimed at, strangers playing together in a card shop. I understand that you want to keep some decorum. It makes sense. But Seedborn Muse on its own, while a good card, you need to have mana sinks and instants and other things up and ready to go. There's still an interaction window. You play the Seedborn Muse on your turn, you don't get the extra mana until the next turn. If someone has a murder, a Path to Exile, a Swords to Plowshares, even, like a Lightning Bolt, I don't think it's that high of a toughness creature, they can just kill it on your turn. And yeah, maybe you keep interaction up then too, but then we're just playing Magic, right? You play a spell, I interact with you, you either stop it or don't. I do think it does change the way the game is played, so I understand, but this one is probably the most right on the definition or close to a game changer I can think of. I think it's fine. It's fine. I understand why it's here. Now let's talk about Food Chain. Okay. Food Chain is an enchantment that basically lets you exile guys, which is a fascinating choice and not a sacrifice. I think maybe in an effort to make it more fair to not get death triggers or bring things back. And the concept of the card is cool. When a creature is exiled by the Food Chain, you get 1 more as mana, 1 more than its power. So the idea is that you would Food Chain your way up. A guy eats a guy, a guy eats a guy, a guy eats a guy, and it's kind of a cool card design. Functionally, what it does at the table is you pick a guy that either makes guys when he comes in, or like Prosh, or another guy that gets bigger somehow, and you exile it infinite times, get infinite mana, and you do pretty degenerate stuff. That's what they were saying here as well. It's like most people who play Food Chain, they don't play it because it's a cool sacrifice outlet that it exiles, that you can use to get some value off your creatures and dump them into food. That's not really what's happening. So I understand why it's on Game Changer list. Usually when a Food Chain hits the board, I think, oh shit, I'm dead. There's no black and white or in between there. So I think if you're playing Food Chain, you know what you're doing. Natural Order, a fascinating card. 4 mana, in green, sack a creature, put a creature onto the battlefield. Now, cheating out creatures in green has been a thing for a long time. Defense of the Heart, or Chord of Calling, even some not necessarily from the deck, but Elvish Piper effects where they go from your hand to the battlefield. That's what green wants to do. We want to play big, fair creatures, but a little faster just to keep up with the blue players. Now, I understand why this card is on the Game Changer list, because they're afraid of cards like Craterhoof Behemoth coming in on turn 3. When you've got a few elves and you can maybe make a swing that takes out a player, or if you've really set up with Dryad Arbors or whatever you've got, like, I get it. I think it's an interesting place to tackle that kind of card, because on its face, yeah, you get to go find your best creature in your deck and play it. But we've now talked about you need a creature, and then you also have to sacrifice this creature and play a second card. So we have 2 cards. We need 2 cards to go together. Yeah, your commander is a creature. But let's talk about Black Reanimator, right? Let's say that you have 2 cards there, Entomb and Reanimate. What's the difference? Entomb pitches a guy, Reanimate brings him back. It's still your biggest card. Maybe it costs you life, I guess. And yeah, it's in the graveyard and you can interact with it, but those cost far less mana than the combo that green would have. So it's possible that they just don't want green to have this effect, or at least mono green. I get that, but it feels like we're already doing that in other colors, or at least very similarly. Now, maybe this is just them trying to understand a way to floodgate a little bit of like unfair play. Fair, I guess, but at the same time, I was surprised to see this kind of card on the Game Changer list. So I think if someone resolves a natural order at my table, I go, damn, what's the biggest dinosaur they're going to get? That's crazy. Godzilla's on the board. I'm, whatever. And if they were planning on doing an infinite combo, they would have found another way. Aura Shards. Aura Shards is an enchantment in Selesnya that whenever you create a creature, play a creature, blow up a non-creature thing, like an artifact or an enchantment or whatever it is. And I have played against this card maybe 5 to 10 times in my life, and every time it comes down, it is the hero of the game. It is crazy how much value this card gives you, and especially for such a low mana cost. It is a very, very, very good card, but it also requires a very specific deck. You need to be playing a deck with creatures, and especially a deck with creatures that you can play a lot of, not just like one big dinosaur. Because at its best case, if you're playing a big stompy Voltron commander, you get 1 removal spell, you can play better stuff. It does, in those decks where you're playing a lot of creatures, result in a way that the game is played that I would consider a game changer. If you're playing a lot of guys and you play them every turn, your opponent can't really play a lot of the supporting cards that mean a lot to a lot of decks, where your Swiftfoot Boots or what have you. At its worst case, it doesn't even do anything. So it is surprising to see this kind of card. It's almost like they're only putting this on the list for the best case scenario. It definitely feels very punishing if it's in the best case scenario, but if it dirtles, it dirtles. So I think pros and cons here as well. Let's talk about Field of the Dead. Field of the Dead is a fantastic card, but it says whenever you have, I think, 7 or more differently named lands, and a land comes into the battlefield, you get a zombie. On its face, that's not that bad. You get a 2/2 zombie for playing a land, but you don't ever do that. In these kinds of decks, remember, you need 7 different kinds of lands. So you're playing every fetch land, you're playing every Evolving Wilds, you're playing every Strip Mine effect, things that will have lands leave that you can call them back from the graveyard to the battlefield, because your goal is to get a crazy amount of value out of this card. Wizards cited a pretty good reason, in my opinion, which is that this is a card that can and will advance your game that lives in the land slot. And permanent removal is not that common. A lot of people in Commander prioritize creature removal, artifact, and enchantment removal. So things like your Path to Exiles, things like those flexible green cards like Back to Nature or whatever that you can choose between a bunch of things, or exile a graveyard. But permanent removal lives in things like Beast Within or Assassin's Trophy. You've really got to kind of be aware that that's happening and then prep for it. And on top of that, a lot of Commander pods don't like playing land destruction because they think it's mean. The thing is, in a world where Field of the Dead exists, as well as like Maze of Ith, Cavern of Souls, there are things that live on the land. I'm about to burp, hold on. Thank you. There are things that live on the land side that are problems for the game that need to go. And so if you don't play any land removal, or at least permanent interaction, this is just a free thing that generates you at worst, maybe a zombie every other turn. But if you're playing a bunch of fetch lands, 3, 4, 5, 6 zombies a turn, especially if you're playing this card, you're usually playing some kind of land-based deck, it gets out of hand very fast. I understand why they put it here. I think this is a pretty good include to a Game Changers, because it does change kind of the way that your pod has to play. Lastly, Mishra's Workshop. It's a land that taps for 3 mana. It's hard to get, but the mana can only be spent for artifacts. I very much understand why this lives here. If you're playing an artifact deck and a Mishra's Workshop comes down, you're so far ahead. But at the same time, it's pretty specific. Kind of interesting to hit this. I think this is more a statement from them to say, hey, fast mana, it should always live in the Troublemaker list. Okay, fair enough. I don't think this will affect 99% of Magic players. I mean, unless your pod has a very prolific artifact player, I think you're okay. On top of these unbans and these game changers, they had a pretty good kind of like representation of their thought process at the end of the article, which I'll link the article in the description. It talked about cards that they are specifically keeping their eye on. I'll talk about 2 here. Farewell. They said that they're looking at it. It is a card they want to make sure that they are on top of, but for right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put on the game changer list. Personally, I agree. I get it. It's cool to see that they're calling out, things that the community is mad about, because when you get Farewell, you basically say bye to the game. But no, they think it's fair, and I think it's good to leave off the list for now. They also called out specifically Craterhoof Behemoth, and they kind of cited the 2 modes. The first is when you cheat a Craterhoof Behemoth out, it feels pretty bad. And I think that's kind of where the Natural Order Game Changer was kind of like spawned from, is that if you have no way to really get Craterhoof Behemoth out early, which Natural Order feels like a good way to do that, then it's just a very good and fair way to turn 10 1/1s into a victory. If you can assemble a board of 10 1/1s, your opponents have no blockers, no interaction, no removal, no counters, no ghostly prisons, no propagandas, and they haven't gained any life. Like, the game should be over. Play the Craterhoof Behemoth and win. That's generally what they said. I agree. Lastly, I'll leave you with a thought process that they talked about. For legendary creatures, they want to be careful about a slippery slope, and I'm very happy to see this, that if they start banning popular commanders like Corval was on the list, Dragon was on the list, Joda was on the list, interesting choices to be sure, that they'll have to draw the line somewhere. Oh, Edgar. And I agree with some of those maybe being on the list, not all of them being on the list, but it's a slippery slope. Once they start doing this, once they start saying some commanders or game changers are banned, then they've got to look at every single legendary in the world and start to assign them to a list. And not only is that very tedious, it's also very lame. Like, if you sit down at a table, the first thing you see is that your opponent is playing an Edgar. Your brain goes, or should, oh, is my deck good enough to play against Edgar? If you've never seen Edgar before, you read Edgar and you go, oh shit, that's Edgar. And then you know what it does, and you go, is my Puppy's tribal deck good enough to play against Edgar? Probably not. Maybe I should play something with removal or interaction. Those conversations don't even need to be handled at like an official level. They are the first thing that happens in a Magic game. You should know when you are playing the game what you're seeing, because those commanders are the first thing you see when the game is revealed. So I think that it's fair, and I appreciate Wizards for not going overboard. Overall, I think a lot of good additions, but as they said in the article a few times, right, this is a beta, they're working on it, they are continuing to monitor, and overall, none of this is a substitute for just a conversation with the people you'll be playing with. So talk to your fellow gamers, and thanks again for tuning in to this news spot. Bye.